Welcome everybody, live from New York. I'm here with the one and only Steve Carpenter from Merck. Steve's going to be talking to us today about how Merck uses AI and task mining to transform processes in the Global Business Services Department. So I'm incredibly excited to be here with Steve today because Steve is an absolute veteran when it comes to finding new technologies, bringing them in and adopting them to generate savings in the organization. And he's had a long history of working with technologies like RPA, process mining, now task mining, and even GenAI. And one of his greatest accomplishments actually was generating $15 million in savings at Merck over the last 3 or 4 years, and $500,000 of those dollars were actually from task mining. So I'm incredibly excited to be here with you today, Steve. Thank you so much for joining us.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, Tuhin. It's really, really nice, all those accolades. Keep them coming.
Absolutely. My name's Tuhin Chakraborty. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Mimica. For those of you that don't know a little bit about Mimica, Mimica is a task mining tool. We record employees as they work on their computers, and we find the best opportunities for process improvement and automation. And we also generate business process maps that show every step that employees take while they're working on their processes. Now, Steve, having such a long history in all these different technologies, I'm sure the audience would love to know what drew you to task mining initially.
So we have done a lot of work in my organization over the last 7 years. I'm part of the digital services group within our GBS function. Think of our GBS function as mostly finance, but definitely some procurement as well. And my role has always been to figure out how to enable the operations team. How do we get them to become more efficient and to drive savings, to drive less manual activities. And so we started off with RPA, moved into other forms of automation. When RPA has a very specific purpose, but it doesn't do everything. And so you have to kind of add things to it like workflow or OCR or other things. And we got to the point where we were doing pretty good, but it was hard to scale the value. And so we started to do things like what we called a design for digital program. So how do I take a Lean Six Sigma mindset, a design thinking mindset, and apply that to a process holistically, and then start to digitalize with some of these other functions. And then that really kind of led us to the path where we were looking at process mining. And because we needed to understand the process holistically, we went with a leading process mining tool. And so we started to use that, basically those digital twins of our process, to really help us dig in and understand where our problems were, where the waste was, where we had bottlenecks, things like that. And process mining's been great, right? It's a really great tool. One of the things, though, that process mining can't do is get down to the desktop. So think of an account to record process, record to report, however you kind of call it in your company. There's a lot of work that goes into creating journal entries and closing the books, but most of that work doesn't happen in the system. So using process mining to look at that is interesting, but it doesn't give you the insights that you're really looking for. That's where, from my perspective, where we needed to bring in task mining so that we could really dig in and start to get really granular around the types of analysis that we were trying to do.
Cool, that makes a lot of sense. So you felt that process mining was not granular enough to study the account to report process, and you thought task mining gave you that desktop level view to understand exactly what was happening on the employee desktops.
That's exactly right.
Really interesting. So, okay, so you've looked at this new technology, task mining. You think that it works well in the account to report process. So how did you go about thinking about evaluating task mining vendors? What were some of the things that were important to you as you were doing that analysis?
So one of the big things was, we know that task mining typically requires an installation of some kind to capture keystrokes and clicks and screenshots and things like that. But if we talk about the A to R team closing the books, that's really critical, specifically at the end of a quarter or the end of a year. And we can't have performance problems. I've been in many organizations where performance was always a question mark during a close period. And so we wanted to make sure that we stayed away from anything that would cause drain on our folks' laptops or their computers as they were processing the work. So that was a really big component that we had to make sure that the agent, the footprint, was light and it wouldn't cause performance problems for the folks that are actually doing work. I don't want them to change their process in order to work around a tool that's trying to capture all their clicks and their keystrokes. And so that was the big one. The second was really, how do I get to the point where I'm looking at a digital twin of what happens on the desktop? So I have 10 people in an organization doing the same thing. I want to be able to see the various activities that are happening, the variation from one employee to another. I want to be able to see that process in all of its glorious detail. And so we needed a tool that could actually give us a process map or a process model, a digital twin of what's actually happening. And then I think that, the third thing was really around the time to insight, right? So how do we get to something where it doesn't take us 6 months, it doesn't take us more than just a few days. So if I can install those agents on a desktop, several desktops, capture their activities, and then within a week or two have information sitting at my fingertips that we can make decisions on. Those are really the big three things that we were looking for in a task mining tool.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so performance, accuracy, and time to value were the three critical things that you were focused on.
Yeah. Performance.
Performance of the agent. Yeah.
Performance of the agent, and then making sure that we had the ability to really drill in to see what they were doing in a meaningful way.
Makes a lot of sense. And for the watchers, I know a lot of them are interested in Mimica. They may be looking at other task mining tools. Can you talk about how Mimica stood out from other people that you evaluated on those three axes?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Mimica, it did everything that we were looking for. There were we had two or three other tools. Actually, we had three other tools, and one of the tools didn't give us a process map at all. So we couldn't really see exactly how the process worked. It told us what what activities were productive versus not productive, but it didn't really show us what that process really looked like. So that was a big gap. There was another tool that we evaluated that during the close, the team had to actually turn it off because it was causing so many performance problems that they couldn't actually get through their work. And if I can't capture the task, obviously it doesn't work. So we had to basically turn that off as well. And in the other one that we looked at, it was 2 months, and I still didn't have visibility into what was actually happening on people's desktops. So we tried. We looked at Mimica and we looked at these other three, but Mimica came out on top in all three of those categories.
I appreciate that. And for us, it's so important to create a high quality product. And the other thing about Mimica is it's the only thing that we do. Every dollar that we earn as a business comes from task mining, and so it's really important for us to make sure that we deliver a really high quality product. So I'm happy that you had that experience with it. So you've evaluated these other vendors, you've chosen Mimica. How did you then think about that first project that you wanted to execute with Mimica in the organization?
So we came back to the A to R. Right, A to R is very difficult for us. The group that we work with in our GBS function, they had a fairly large productivity target. And if anybody knows anything about GBS typically has targets. They need to reduce cost over time. That's the point of kind of centralizing things into a GBS function. And so they had productivity targets that they were trying to figure out. And we had done a lot of work in terms of automation and building workflows to help the process run smoother. But we hadn't done a lot of work in terms of understanding what that process really looks like. Again, because the system logs that are in our SAP environment aren't capturing most of the work that they do when they close the books, or they do cash and investment accounting, or they do intercompany. So it was really that because they had a really large productivity target that they needed to hit, and then it was because we hadn't gotten to the point where we could actually see what that process really looked like. And then I had a set of willing participants. We actually did a quick, during this POC that we did with you and the others, as soon as this group saw the work that came out of the finance master data work that we had done, I was in Prague. I was sitting there in a room. There were 3 or 4 of them around me. There were a bunch of people on the screen. And as soon as you guys showed us what it is that we could actually see, that I could see that their faces were lighting up. I could see their jaws dropping to the table because they were just so impressed with the type of visibility that we're able to get. So, it was a combination of all of those things to kind of get us to that first project.
That's really cool. So you mentioned that they had a strong reaction to seeing the results for the first time, which is something I've experienced before. I've been in the room when people see it. I think it has something to do with the fact that these maps have never really been delivered at this level of granularity before.
Oh, yeah.
When you see the screenshots, you see the variants, you see the exceptions, you're seeing things that even though you've been working on this process for many years, you didn't know them, and now you're seeing them for the first time. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so the folks that are kind of leading the A2R team, they understand what their processes look like. They understand what the SOPs are, right? The standard operating procedures, the work instructions. They have a good handle on that, but they're not living it day to day. They're not in the trenches. They're not doing the work. They've got a team that does that, and they're trying to manage through analytics and KPIs, and it does help. But it doesn't get them to the point where they can truly understand some of the pain points that their teams are going through. There's a lot of variety in how people get work done. There's a lot of variety in the inputs that come in, and that basically leads to a lot of variety in how they execute and try and get things done. So that's really the benefit here that they were trying to go after.
Great. Now you did a first project with Mimica, and we were talking just before the show, and you mentioned that seasonality was something that you learned about through that first project. Can you talk a little bit about that project and just some of the improvements that you were able to identify through the use of Mimica?
Yeah, so we have a fairly significant team that is spread across Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, San Jose, Costa Rica, and Prague, Czech Republic. Plus, we have a BPO partner that's mostly in India, but I think there's a few folks in China as well. So there's a lot of people doing this work across the globe, and so we're trying to figure out are we standard? Do we have the same experience in Europe that we do in the Americas, that we do with our BPO partner, and so on. So that was really the project. We basically took 50 recorders, and we put it on the desktops and laptops of the folks within our centers as well as within our BPO partner, and we turned it on for a month. We wanted to capture a full cycle of doing work within the A2R space. Monthly is very relevant to them, and so we basically turned it on for about 30 days and started capturing data. And then within just a little bit of time, once the recording period was over, we started to get insights into some of the things that were going on. So we found a couple of things where it's like, hey, we're using these tools, and these are things that are really highly automatable. And so we found a couple of use cases where it's like, well, we should be building a bot, or we should be building a workflow to support that. We found one use case, which was pretty timely and pretty relevant and connected to GenAI. We have a lot of people, once the results are in, once they've kind of put in all the journal entries and they've started to look at the certification of our books, they write commentary and they say, this is a variance that we saw, and here's why the variance exists, and so on. And we just so happened to have a project that had been kicked up to start to use generative AI to help with commentary on these types of solutions. And so it was really easy to take the outcome of the Mimica work and then hand it off to the generative AI team as a benefit to say, look, there's a bunch of work here. We spend X number of hours just doing commentary. We have a project where we should be able to generate that commentary, with a single expert's voice, using generative AI to really help the people kind of move through that process much, much quicker. And as most people know, in the A2R space, there's a lot of really compressed timeframes And so being able to do this allows folks to focus on the things that are the most important at the end of the month. So that was another one. And finally, the one that you mentioned, seasonality. We realized just by taking a look at when people were working on specific things, right? We went really broad. We took a look at all of A to R. We didn't look at a specific process. And we found that there are aspects and processes and tasks that people are doing that start to complement each other if we just take a look at who's busy over what part of the month. And so we were able to take a look at that and really understand that, we probably have some synergy that we can have in terms of being able to kind of connect those different schedules together, and that we were potentially overstaffed by a bit because of just the view into seasonality. So,
really cool. So you were actually able to drive some savings as a result of finding that seasonality, and I don't know how much you're allowed to talk about it, but is there anything you can share in terms of what savings you were able to derive from that?
So, you mentioned it in the kind of the opening, not just from seasonality, but from all of these solutions, all of these activities, we've found we're probably about $1 million worth of benefits. No, sorry, not $1 million, $500,000 worth of benefits. I'm getting excited. I was thinking about the next project. We found about $500,000 worth of benefits in terms of being able to kind of automate and get rid of some of the seasonality differences and some of the there was even a pure configuration. We just went to one of our systems and made some tweaks on how it was configured, and that reduced a heck of a lot of manual work. So there's a lot of manual activities that we've been able to kind of justify coming out of the project that we did.
Very cool. And I love that part of that savings actually came from GenAI, because this is a new technology. I'm sure a lot of the people watching are really excited about the potential of this new technology. And I think a lot of people are also asking, how can I bring GenAI into my business? What are the best opportunities to actually get concrete value from this new and exciting technology? So you mentioned that you guys actually have a GenAI team at work. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about that team and what its sort of remit is?
Yeah, so we've got a team in IT that's responsible for our generative AI platforms and major projects. But I also have a team that we've just recently created that will work for finance to basically apply generative AI to solve certain activities. So some of the things that they're thinking about, we're looking at a lot of horizontal types of activities. And when I say horizontal, I mean things that can apply to finance, but they can also apply outside of finance. They can go to IT or our manufacturing group or whatever. So we're looking at kind of mailbox management, mailbox and kind of service queue management. So how do we classify, route, and even respond to stakeholders, whether they're internal or external, using generative AI as a base. But there's, generative AI is one of the technologies, one of the capabilities that we're looking at. We marry that with all the other stuff that everybody has had in their toolkit for years and years and years, RPA, workflow, OCR, et cetera. So we're basically managing mailbox. We're working on a project to manage our mailboxes and our service queues better. We're looking at a reconciliation engine. We do a lot of work where we look at documents, PDFs, and we have to compare that to something else. And so we're working on a reconciliation engine. So how do I use generative AI to pull out the information that's sitting inside some of these structured or even unstructured documents? And then the third one is, like everybody, we're building intelligent chatbots. So I can query a chatbot, learn how to create a purchase requisition, and not cause a downstream defect that an invoice resolution team has to manage later on. So those are the types of things that we're working on specifically in finance, but then, you can think of any other use case across the enterprise where, being able to author information and just be able to classify things. Those are some of the big use cases we've got going on.
Really cool. And that's also very similar to what we're seeing across our customers. It sounds like in this instance, Mimica actually did identify an opportunity for GenAI that your team could then go and work on.
Yeah, that was the commentary project. The GenAI how do we basically take a look at our results and do the comparison between this, this quarter, last quarter, this period, last period, and give the executive team visibility into why things are happening. And that typically requires a lot of people putting a lot of thought and taking a lot of time to write that commentary out. And so we're really looking at how do we leverage generative AI to help the people get through that in a much shorter time frame.
Really interesting. Now, speaking of things taking a long time, one of the things that we've heard with other task mining tools is there can be quite a lot of work involved to actually get to the output. Now, can you talk a little bit about your experience with Mimica? How much work did your team have to do in order to get to the results and those insights?
I think you know the answer to this too.
I'm leading you a little bit,
Kind of a
Steve.
leading question, yeah. Honestly, my team did the work to install the agents and to make sure that when we did so, there was the right level of security and privacy and communication. And that's it. We didn't have to understand the tasks that were coming out. Your tool did that automatically. We did have to kind of go in and AI is only as good as it is. And so there has to be a human in the middle. So we did kind of go in and say, oh, that is really connected to that. So let's kind of pull those things together. But in general, all my team really did was kind of do the setup and then, hold people's hand through the recording process. Make sure they knew that they could pause it when they needed to. Make sure that they knew that the information that was coming out was going to be used to support process optimization and not, workforce analysis, right? That's always a big fear when you put an agent on someone's machine. What are you going to use this information for? So we wanted to make sure that they really understood that this was only about process optimization and just understanding what that process looks like. So almost no work.
I appreciate that, Steve. And I wanted to bring it up because that's something that we work really hard on. And I'm proud to say that we have the largest AI machine learning team in the task mining industry. So
cool.
Glad to know that it's working.
I didn't know that.
So I know people that are trying task mining would love to hear from you. What are some of the lessons that you learned through this engagement?
So one of the big lessons, our first project was probably a big, hairy project that maybe it shouldn't have been the first one that we took on. But it provided a lot of value, and it was something that we definitely needed. But I would say there's definitely a distinction between when you focus on a specific process and how much time you're going to capture, how many tasks you're going to capture, how many people you're going to install that process or that agent on. That's going to get you to value real quick because you're really looking at a singular thing and you're really trying to drive and understand that specific process. So that was one thing. We did the opposite. We went big bang. We put it on 50 machines. We said, just do what you do, record everything. And then it took us some time. It's still taking, there's so many tasks that kind of came out of that. There were hundreds of tasks that came out of that analysis that we're still chasing down each one of these other tasks to try and understand, is this relevant? Is this important? Is this causing, work that shouldn't be there? But the main ones, right, obviously came out real quick. And we were able to do some analysis on that, but there's just a lot of information to sift through and to understand. And so the lesson, I guess, there would be, how do you, if it depends on what you want to accomplish, I would say, go focus, probably maybe for your first project, get your feet underneath you, and then, you can focus on some of those bigger bang projects, because you're going to find a lot of value in those just because you've recorded so much information.
Makes a lot of sense. So maybe instead of 50 people in a 1 month recording, maybe 10 to 15 people in a 2 to 3 week recording, get in and get out.
Depends on the process, but yeah, I would say keep it simple to begin with for those of you who haven't done task mining to begin with.
Yep, makes a lot of sense. Now, you're looking at big picture process improvement at Merck, and some of that's related to task mining, some of it's related to RPA, process mining, other technologies. For those in the audience that are interested in bringing this to their leadership, what have you seen be successful in terms of getting buy-in from your leadership around, these bigger process improvement initiatives?
Yeah, so there's probably a couple things. The first thing that I've seen that provides the most kind of buy-in, immediate buy-in, is a proof of concept or a proof of value, depending on what it is you're trying to accomplish. People have a hard time imagining what their process really looks like, and you need to be able to get in and capture some of that, whether that's in a system with process mining or on a desktop with task mining. You need to be able to capture some of that and show them immediately what their process looks like, because I guarantee you most of the people that you're going to talk to are going to be surprised at something, at most of the things that they actually find inside their process. I don't think that I've been through one proof of concept where somebody wasn't looking at it going, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that was actually happening in my process. So that's a really big one. Get out, do your POCs, do your POVs, and do them quickly, right? If I spin up a digital twin in my process mining tool, it takes us less than a week to make that happen. And that's perfect because it allows us to kind of put the process in front of them. If I do this with a task mining tool with our proof of concept, it took us less than a week to basically record enough information that we could see it and that it made sense, and we could start to really imagine what that next step would look like. So that's the first piece. The second piece, specifically with task mining, there's a lot of potential privacy concerns. Right? You're basically installing an agent, you're capturing clicks and keystrokes and screenshots, and people want their information to be private. But the good news is that with Mimica, you guys have a ton of privacy already built in, right? From my perspective, even, you probably have maybe a little bit, in some cases, gone overboard in terms of masking some of that data. There's some things that I don't want you to mask, but that's okay. But to start off, out of the gates, you guys have a ton of privacy already built into the tool. And you can pause the recorder, you can turn off the recorder. It doesn't have to constantly run. And so that was really beneficial in being able to kind of have people buy into this agent being installed on their desktop. It was really beneficial in having the discussion with our HR organizations, right? We're in 3 different parts of the globe, and each one of those has different requirements around how do you manage employees and make sure that they consent, or that you're capturing this for a legitimate reason, et cetera. And then also the legal departments to make sure that we're going to do with this only exactly what we say we're going to do with this, and so on. So those are the 2 big things. Really get in and show people what they can do quickly, and then make sure that they understand the privacy and security implications of what's going on.
And the privacy and security implications are prevalent in every engagement that we do with customers. We actually have a different version of the tool that we deploy in the German market, where the data can't be traced back to any individual.
Interesting.
So it's very important in the German market for the data to be aggregated, and you're really showing what the process is, what the team's performance is, but not drilling down into individuals. Now, we're flexible, so in the US it's a little bit different, but when it comes to anonymization, that's something we take very seriously.
Yeah, you do.
Sometimes a little bit too seriously, maybe. But it's incredibly important to protect our clients' data and the SME's privacy at all times.
Yeah, and again, we're not looking at the data. We're looking at the process. So when I say that, it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, because I'm not necessarily looking at what people are sending in an email. I'm not looking at what's on their spreadsheet. I'm looking at, well, what are they doing in that spreadsheet, and how are they using it, and how is that part of the process? And so it's not necessarily about the information or the content, it's about the process itself.
Totally. And you were saying also the time to value was the second piece in terms of getting the initiative across the line. So just letting people know that, hey, this is not a 3-month engagement.
No.
That you can deploy the recorder, get the results very quickly.
Exactly. You can. We have.
So, moving away from Mimica and task mining and talking a little bit more about GBS at Merck and what you guys see as the future of your roadmap there. Can you talk a little bit about future plans that you have within GBS?
Yeah, so process transformation for us is becoming very critical, very important. not only within GBS, but across the enterprise. And so we're driving our process transformation. And when I say process, that means both the technologies that support process mining and task mining. So Mimica would be part of that kind of remit, because we believe that there are processes that are out there that aren't 100% system-based, that need to have, even if they are system-based, they need to have visibility to what's actually happening on the desktop. And so from that point of view, process transformation is starting to go big across the organization. We're working on a big S4 project. We're not sure exactly when that's going to start or exactly what that time frame looks like, but that's on our horizon as well. And so we're trying to make sure we understand what current state looks like versus what future state's going to look like, so that we can do some comparisons. So I potentially see the use of process mining and task mining to kind of fit into the middle of all that, to help us kind of understand what that trajectory looks like, what that change management needs to look like. And then we've got these big generative AI projects that are going to be really impactful beyond personal productivity, which is what a lot of companies have seen in the beginning of the generative AI journey, is personal productivity. Now we're starting to get into true savings or revenue recognition or top line growth, et cetera. There's a lot of things that we have going on, and each one of those big projects has a need to understand where we're at today, and then when we make changes, where are we going to be, and what is the difference between that, and am I really pulling through the value, and are there things that I can do differently, better, more, in order to make sure that value gets realized.
Very cool. If there's anything that you need from Mimica to help you guys accomplish those initiatives, product roadmap, feature requests, let me know, and we'll get right on it.
I have your cell phone number right here, so we're good.
All right, so you've talked for a long time, Steve. I want to make sure that you get the chance to ask me some questions as well. Is there anything you're curious about that you'd like to know?
Yeah, so I've just kind of laid bare how we did a bunch of stuff. How are you seeing other clients approach things? Are we doing things that we should be doing? Are there things that we aren't taking into account that we should be taking into account? What's your recommendation for us? What should we be doing differently in order to improve how we use your tools?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you guys have done a great job and gotten $500,000 in savings, which is an amazing accomplishment, especially in the short period of time that you've used the tool. Now, of course, my suggestion is to use the tool in a bunch of different areas, because I think you had 50 people on the team, 50 recorders, 1 month of recording. Now going forward, you could try doing like a 10-person project, 15-person project, and spread it out over multiple different areas. And that's just going to give you more breadth of value. Probably what you guys did with the 50-person team, recording the majority of that team, probably could have gotten away with recording, let's say 30%, 20 to 30%, in order to get to see Mimica being used across a number of different use cases.
Okay.
Now, one thing that we didn't talk about as well is you guys have had a lot of success in finance, but a lot of organizations are also finding success with Mimica in other departments. So HR is one where there's a lot of operational work that happens. Yeah. Even operations, more in the core operations of Merck's business.
Yeah.
So we've got customers in many different industries, shipping and logistics, insurance, for example. So in insurance, the core operations would be claims. And in shipping and logistics, one of the main ones is customs clearance. So in every industry, you could think, whatever the core transactional operation is in that business, that's a great opportunity to drive value. The scope of the work is typically larger, so you might deploy 10 to 15 recorders, and you're covering a larger team of up to 100 people and getting even more significant ROI on that recorder investment.
Okay, that's good advice. We've got a few projects in mind from a process mining point of view. We have started to expand the boundaries beyond finance, and so I see 100% visibility into the future. We're going to expand our task mining across to the rest of the enterprise as well. So I think that's good, and we'll take you up on that. The second question I had, you guys, you talk about generative AI, you talk about the miner and the mapper. What's on your roadmap? What are the things that we should be thinking about now in terms of what is Mimica going to be offering to us so that we can position ourselves well to start thinking about use cases that would kind of apply?
Yeah, it's a great question. What's unique about Mimica, from my perspective, is that we've been able to process click and keystroke data in a way that nobody has been able to do before. Now, the way that we kind of showcase that in our product today is through Miner and Mapper, which is really about identifying the different tasks and processes that teams are doing and then mapping them out. But Miner and Mapper are both snapshots of what a team is doing at a particular point in time.
Yep.
What we've been hearing from customers is that they actually want to measure processes on an ongoing basis. So what some people might call continuous monitoring. So, my vision for Mimica along that axis is that someday soon you'll be able to log in and see an entire digital twin of your entire organization. So every team, every department, the entire company, how all the work is flowing across the business in a continuous real-time way. You'll always be able to have up-to-date analytics on what each team is doing. And the opportunities for improvement and automation will sort of bubble up. So every day you'll log in and you'll automatically see new recommendations for how to improve your process, how to eliminate waste, and make your organization as efficient as possible. So that's one key axis that we're doing a lot of work on.
I like that because it's my vision as well to have an enterprise digital process twin, right? So how can I take a look at Merck in its entirety and be able to see how things happen, how things operate, and where the friction points are. So that's perfect. I like that vision.
That's great to hear. And the second piece, and we hear about this a lot from customers, is they want to get to automation faster. And so what we want to do at Mimica is be able to have anybody in the organization deploy an automation at the click of a button. So we've mined the process, we've mapped it out, we know what all the steps are. Now, someone will review that, ensure that everything looks good, but then at the click of a button, you can actually deploy an automation agent that can execute that process autonomously. We actually have a little bit of experience with this at Merck. Do you want to maybe talk briefly about that little project we did?
Yeah, so in the account to record project, we were, generative AI was something that we wanted to really focus on, but also generative AI coming out of task mining. And so if we identify an opportunity that's highly automatable, can we get through the automation part of this process, faster? Because sometimes it takes time to build a bot and go through all the right SDLC approach and all that good stuff. So there's just time and energy that gets put into that. So one of my analysts on my team, he went into, I think it was Miner for this particular thing. This was a POC. It was a proof to ensure that we could do it. Found a highly automatable step or a set of tasks, and basically downloaded your PDD, the process design document that comes inside Miner. I think you also have it available as part of Mapper. But we downloaded the PDD. He had to tweak it just a bit because the generative AI solution we were using doesn't use pictures at the time. And I think he had to kind of specifically change some of the wording just so that he used to be an automation architect. So he knows exactly how the bots expect to see things. So he changed the PDD, he tweaked it a bit, and then he put it into our generative AI internal tool and basically created a Power BI desktop automate bot within just seconds. It was able to kind of generate all the code, and then we were able to put that into Power BI desktop and basically have a bot of it readily available. So the idea of using generative AI and other AI to kind of help us automate things is fantastic. I think that's gonna be very valuable to a lot of organizations.
So cool. I mean, we're truly at the cusp of a revolution when it comes to automation.
The other thing that I would ask that you think about, give me recommendations on how to improve my process.
Yes, yes, that is a critical piece. I think I mentioned it as part of the vision. We have with these, language models, and I mean, they can reason, they can understand, what work is happening on a computer. They can reason about where inefficiencies are, and we can leverage that technology to even take recommendations to another level where, now you've collected a significant quantity of data. How can we leverage that intelligence to find what the right improvement or right automation opportunity is, surface it in a way that makes it really easy to digest? Totally on the same page with you there, Steve.
Great. Love it.
So I know people are eager to get to the Q&A. Do you have any more burning questions for me before we kick it over to the audience?
No, let's go to the audience right away.
All right. So give me 1 second here. I'm just going to pull open these questions. All right, we've got lots of good questions here.
All right, I'm ready.
Okay, so the first question is, how does Mimica perform task mining for all different scenarios of a particular single process? Should users make sure to record all scenarios before completing a task mining flow? And then they give a little example here, which is accounts payable may have one scenario for PO, one without PO. And within these two scenarios, there might be different types of exception handling scenarios. So what I can do is take a quick shot at that, and I'll maybe kick it over to you to give your perspective.
I'll let you talk about this one.
So one thing that was really important to us with Mimica is that we really take the friction away from the recording process. So we want people to be able to record continuously without having to think about, okay, I'm recording this process, or I'm recording this other process. Now I'm recording a variant within this process. So how Mimica works is you basically record continuously with Miner, and that's going to record everything the person does. All the different tasks, all the different processes, all the variants and exceptions will all be captured by the tool. And then what you do is, for any given task that you want to map out, which in this case was accounts payable, you can simply generate a process map with Mapper for accounts payable. And that process map is going to automatically contain all the variants and exceptions in the process. So if sometimes there's a PO, sometimes there's not a PO, and even within those, there are different variants, all of those will be captured within the process map. And you don't have to do anything special for that. It all comes kind of out of the box from the tool.
Yeah, so I'll add on to that. So the PO, non-PO, totally get that question. We have those processes, obviously, in our company as well. What Tuhin described was basically the way that we looked at our A to R project. So how do you kind of just record what people are doing and then let Mimica decide what those specific tasks are? So it will automatically cluster and configure those tasks and say, this is your PO process, this is your non-PO process, or however the algorithm decides. So that's one way to do it. The other way is really the focused way. So how do you potentially look at just a PO process and perform that over and over and over again? And that's where the stop, start, or the pause and the start of the recording can come in. So I think it depends on the specific use case or the specific approach that you want to take. That big, broad, here's a bunch of tasks that people are doing, and let Mimica kind of sort it out and then sift through the data after. Or you can be very targeted and say, I'm only looking at the PO process, so only record the PO process, and then just do it over and over and over again for a few days. And then Mimica will be able to show you what that PO process looks like. And you could have a different recorder do the non-PO process. So I would say you could probably do that a couple different ways.
Absolutely, yeah. It is a bit flexible. So if you want to be targeted, you can absolutely do that. If you want to set it and forget it, that works too. Next question is about resource size. So how many Merck resources from your Center of Excellence were required to run that project with 50 recorders? How big was the team on your end that worked on that?
So I had one person this is our first project, and so I had one person who set up all the recorders, and we're basically helping the folks to understand, when to turn it on, when to turn it off, if they had issues, how to solve them, things like that. So that was one person. It wasn't a full-time dedicated person. And then I had one other person who, once the recording was done and we got visibility into minor, he was the one who would spearhead the discussions with the subject matter experts, with the folks, the GPOs, the global process owners within A to R, to say, okay, here's what we see. Does this make sense? How should that work? Or is this task connected to that task? And so it was really, at most, 2 FTEs to kind of run that 50-person project and to come up with the 6 or 8 different tasks and the value that was associated with it.
And you got some support from our customer success function as well, right?
Yeah, no, and that doesn't count any of the Mimica folks that are there, whenever you need them. So we were able to talk to you guys on a regular basis to kind of help us through that process.
Absolutely. So next question's about privacy. So can you talk a little bit about how Mimica handles the privacy of the agents that are actually doing the recording? The concern from this person is about personal space, ensuring that it doesn't feel Big Brother, or avoiding kind of panic or tension in the workplace. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so from a technology perspective, all the right levers are built into the tool. You can stop, start, and pause. You can do all of that within the tool itself. And then again, the output is very, very private. You guys, like I said before, you obfuscate data that I wouldn't have expected that you would obfuscate, but it comes, because again, we're not looking at the data, we're looking at the process. So that's kind of a technology perspective. From a change management perspective, from getting the humans comfortable with what's going on. We were very open with the team that we were recording. We came into them, we said, this is what we're gonna do, this is how we're gonna do it. We made sure that HR and legal were stood up and they understood exactly what our intent was. We sent out a note, a change communication early on before the recorders ever got installed. We gave people the ability to opt out of putting the recorder on their machine, because again, we're not recording the entire team, we're recording just a part of it. So we were able to give people the ability to opt out from the recording. And then at the end of the day, again, they had the ability to start or pause and kind of stop the recording. So that was the approach that we took. We had to follow all the right local laws and regulations to make sure that we could get consent in the right way, because there's different parts of the world that allow you to just ask for consent, and there's other parts of the world that don't. So we had to do all of that, but we basically went through our privacy office, our HR, and our legal office to make sure that we had everything, all the I's dotted and T's crossed. And then we really spent a lot of time and energy to help them understand what we were doing, why we were doing it, and what it was going to look like at the end of the day.
Being really open, transparent,
Absolutely.
About what's happening with the recording, why it's being performed, all those things can be really helpful. And the way that we think about it is putting the person who's being recorded at the center of the recording experience. Putting them in control, making sure they can start, stop, pause it. They are participating in an active effort to make the organization more efficient. Now, we got a question about whether you had used a Mimica in collections, which I don't believe you have, but could you talk a little bit about how you might think about using it in collections, or if it could create value in that area?
I think so. I mean, we have tools that help us with our collections process in SAP, and so there's a whole set of activities that happen. But I can tell you, there's a lot of spreadsheets that are being used. We're capturing customer information. People keep their manual trackers. Not all of this is desirable behavior. I'd love for the team to use the system a little bit more appropriately, more efficiently. but we know that manual activity is happening in the collection space. And so I could definitely see value in just understanding what people are doing. Are they all using the same tracker, or are they using different trackers? And then how much time do they spend, looking up information on their web browser about the customer? So maybe there's a know your customer type of element there that you could potentially take a look at as you're trying to figure out how you're going to get collections. And then there's a lot of master data potential issues that cause collections problems, and so you'll be able to start to see, the different parts of the process or the variation in the process when the master data is not accurate, so that you can start to see where maybe you need to shore that up a bit, so that it'll make your collections process a little bit smoother.
Makes a lot of sense. So master data management and getting visibility into what's happening in SAP and also outside the system.
Yep, exactly.
And looks like we've got one more here. Oh, a couple more coming in. So can you talk a little bit about the Mimica dashboard and looking at that dashboard to highlight where there are automation opportunities? Was Mimica able to support you in that way in terms of showing what the automatability level of different tasks were?
I think you know the answer to this question. The answer is yes. And I will say this. I was able to look at the dashboard, and I was able to understand the specific tasks that were there. So, I've got a great team who are way more in depth into these processes than I am, but I was able to take a look at the dashboards that kind of came out of the box. And it showcased the specific projects that we had kind of identified. It showcased all the tasks that were associated with that the Mimica AI had kind of created for us. And then it showed us how automatable that was, as well as the complexity of the automation, I think is what you call it.
Yep, that's right. The ease of deployment.
Ease of automation. Yep. So the ease of deployment. So it was able to show me, there were a couple of where it was just like it was very highly automatable and very easy to automate, and that was actually the one that we took that we put into generative AI and built that Power BI desktop bot. So the interface in my mind is very intuitive, and even somebody like me can use it to understand where we're at.
Very cool. Last one here. We talked a little bit about ROI. How do you guys think about using Mimica to measure ROI? Or did Mimica support you in the calculation of ROI or time savings, let's say?
Absolutely. So, obviously there's a license cost, and then there's the cost of the people that are helping to run the program. So you've got to take that into account. But again, like I said, we didn't have to do a lot of work beyond that, besides the analysis. And so you guys were there every step of the way. Shout out to Rajan. He's a great resource if he's on your project. Good for you. He's a great guy. But Rajan was there showing us what the value could potentially look like, having conversations with my analysts, having conversations with the subject matter experts on a regular basis, helping us sift through all of the information that was there to kind of give us that perspective on where the value elements are coming from. So obviously we've spent less than we've earned back in terms of the productivity that we were able to accomplish out of that just first project, and there's still a lot more to go.
So exciting, and we're so excited to continue working with you in the future, Steve. I don't see any more questions coming in, so I think that concludes our quarterly webinar. It's been an absolute pleasure hanging out with you, as always. We're going to be doing another one of these, I believe, in the new year with one of our customers, Clearbank, so keep an eye out for that. But otherwise, so fun hanging out and talk. I feel like we could talk for hours, but
yeah, we could.
It's been an absolute pleasure. So thank you for being with us, and thank you all for tuning in. We look forward to seeing you at the next one.